Hey everybody, welcome to The Bottom Line. Michael Noland here, and tonight I know I've got a great video for you. You know, in my last video I covered 5 of rock and roll's most underrated guitarists. But you know, when I put the list together, there were like 20 guitarists that came up. Now, I'm not saying I'm gonna do a list on all 20 of the most underrated guitarists. Unless you guys wanna hear more, let me know in the comments, of course. But my original intent with that video was to cover the top 10 at the very least. Now, I shot 2 separate shoots for that video. One of the files became corrupted, and so I edited the first shoot as a single video. So these 5 guitarists would have been in the same video as those. Now, I promised you a great video, so I'm gonna try and marry up all this stuff. We've discussed who my favorite bands are, and I'm even having a lot of fun by placing them in a mythical Mount Olympus. I've named the Beatles as Zeus, of course. I've identified Led Zeppelin as Poseidon, and I know there's some of you out there that think that they should be Hades. A point well taken. But since they are my number 2, and Poseidon was generally considered number 2 in power, I stand by my decision. And of course, in the Hades position, I have placed Pink Floyd. Alright, so we've already talked about the big 3, and I've already identified several other Olympian level bands, and that list is on my channel page, by the way. So I want to make it real clear here. These Olympian level bands, these are bands that have been so important to me musically that I not only see them as co-equals to my top 3 choices, but there are times when I prefer to listen to one of these bands or 3 of these bands at a time over listening to even the Beatles, the mighty Led Zeppelin, or the curiously placed Pink Floyd. These are the bands who exist on Mount Rock Olympus, folks. And so here's where I tie it all together. You see, a couple of the guitarists that we will be discussing tonight actually are members of these 2 bands that I'm about to announce. The first band I want to announce, I've almost pre-announced it several times, but I do want to place this band right on Olympus, right next to Yes, right next to Queen, right next to the Brothers 3. And curiously, this is yet another English band. But it's not a band that's known for being a band of the 60s or the 70s, even though their first couple of albums came out in the late 70s. Generally, they're looked at as either one of the top 80s bands or the top 80s band separated from classic rock. But you know, I disagree with that. Everything about the Police is classic rock, and we'll discuss them later. So that's band number 6 out of 13. Remember my loophole, folks. Hades gets a pass. Since we've included him, there are still 12 other Olympian bands. And now we have 6. No, not 6, but 7. And for the first time on my list, in comes my first American band. Now, for those of you who have been astute enough to look at my About page occasionally, I always provide a hint for my next Olympian level band. Okay, so enough of the build-up. My choice for Olympian level band number 7, Steely Dan. Alright, so I'm going to cover my reasons in the next few videos as to why I chose these next 2 bands, but believe me, I've put a lot of thought into this. And remember, I always have a few rules about these Olympian level bands. Either they have done things that are just so undeniable, like the Beatles and Led Zeppelin, as far as ruling an entire decade unto themselves, or they are a genre-creating band, and to my ears are the best example of that genre. For prog rock, I've chosen Yes, right? For my ultimate psychedelic band, it would be Pink Floyd, although they're not often seen as a psychedelic band. I just think they took psychedelia where it should have gone, and people just quit calling it that. So I'll be getting into the reasons why the police belong at the table, and I'll also, of course, give you my reasons, especially concerning Steely Dan. I have some specific reasons why that band is on this list. And you know, only one of those very specific reasons is the magnificent guitar playing of Larry Carlton. You know, when Steely Dan first came out, I thought Denny Diaz was doing half of the solos that he wasn't doing. I, of course, loved Jeff Skunk Baxter, but you know, over the years, as I would re-listen to these albums, and I did often, I found out that it was often Larry Carlton who provided the solo that I really loved. You know, guys, this man's not just a virtuoso, which he is. There is no doubt about that. But he has what I talked about in my last video. He has a vocabulary. He goes places that your average jazz guitarist wouldn't think of going. And guess what? He writes those solos, and then these very complicated solos. Well, just ask any Steely Dan fan if they could imagine any other solo or any vamping or the changing of the solo other than what they've heard on the album. They know their music that well. And I'm going to cheat here a bit because I'm going to give you another guitarist who's underappreciated, and he almost made the list, except that I had to give it to this guy, right? But how about the excellent solo on Kings by this band on their first album? Randall Elliott to the rescue. I used to think that was Denny Diaz, and I was so wrong. So anyway, there's the two for the price of one that I offered you in my last video when I compared Ronnie Montrose and Robin Trower. Now, as you could tell in my last video, not all of my choices are necessarily riff masters. And if you've watched any of my past videos, you know I'm a fan of riff masters. Riff masters are wonderful. I could just listen to a guy talk to me by riffing away the evening all night. And there are going to be a couple of guitarists that offer something extra, and we'll talk about that later. But here is a riff master for you, Johnny Winter. Man, if you ever asked me for, just give me the best smokehouse, blues-based, rock, classic sound with guitar in your face, this is the guy I'd send him to. You know, when he was hot, when he was real popular, he would rank as high as #1 on certain lists. And you know, his whole genre was real popular for 5-10 years, and he survived very well on that. But it seems to me he's almost become a specialty act when these lists are put together. Oh yeah, Johnny over there at the Roadhouse. What a load of crap. This man is a riff master. This man tells a tale when he solos. This man sings his heart out, and he doesn't know when to stop. And as far as being a showman, man, the guy's got it all covered. Mr. Johnny Winter. All right, so if you remember in my last video, I kind of predicted that there may be those who would not agree with my choice of George Harrison even being on a great guitarist list at all. And my next choice for this list is another guitarist that some may feel don't belong on a great guitarist list, and I thoroughly disagree. And that, of course, is Andy Summers. You know, in fact, when I listen to Andy's body of work, I hear George Harrison on steroids. This is the chordal approach that early George supplied for the Beatles, absolutely orchestrating, for the most part, the entire Police. And when he multi-layers his pieces, it's wonderful. But when you watch him live, the pieces he chooses to play, the man is just a fantastic guitarist, and quite literally 1/3 of the Police, them being a rare band where all members are vital. Okay, so my next one does get love in lists, but not high enough as far as I'm concerned, and that's the mighty Brian May of Queen. You know, as I've said before, I've seen Queen live on 2 occasions, and I just couldn't believe at the time that a guitarist could perform all of that sound live in front of me. When I found out later that he was responsible for putting together and constructing not only his own guitar, but devices that he could use so that he could overlay his guitar parts live, that just put him slightly ahead of Joe Walsh, who was known to be tinkering with what you could do electronically with a guitar. You know, it was George Martin who said that one of his main things that he taught the Beatles was to teach them to think symphonically. Brian May is the most symphonic, heavy metal at times, barbershop quartet at others, guitarist that I've ever seen in my life. No. Brian May needs to be bumped up in the list, guys, way up. Now, I don't know if my next choice is going to be very controversial or not. I know this next guitarist has a lot of fans, and he's recognized as a truly great artist in general. But guitar fans who prefer riff masters over, say, a total guitar experience, they may not put him very high on their list. And I'm talking about David Gilmour. You know, it was a friend of mine that pointed me into the direction of B.B. King, because B.B. King had kind of a too mellow style for me to really appreciate at that time. And he said, listen to how that man feels his way through his licks. He's not the fastest riffer. He's not doing anything that 5 or 6 other great blues guitarists wasn't doing currently, but none of them had his feel. David Gilmour is rock's answer to B.B. King, in my personal opinion. And with Gilmour, you not only get that touch, that feel like BB had with the blues, but you also get a guitar player who thinks orchestrationally, approaching his guitar licks to orchestrate the song, to benefit it. And of course, he's got some pretty badass licks himself. But to me, it's David Gilmour who took rock god guitar status in a slightly different direction. That makes him a genre establisher in my book. Okay, so there you go. There's my choice. 6 for the price of 5, folks. And if you think about it, 12 for the price of 10 with the past 2 videos. All right, so that about wraps up my top 10 with a couple of bonuses thrown in for you. Most underrated guitarists of rock and roll, in my opinion. Now, it's been my full intention to already have published my comparison video of Rubber Soul and Revolver. I mentioned that I had some post-editing issues with it, and it was sound and it can't be overcome, so I have to reshoot that video. But it's going to have to take just another bit of a back seat, because my next video out will be my analysis, my critique, my thoughts on Led Zeppelin's magnificent Houses of the Holy. Okay, so as usual, let me know what you think of my choices. Who else would you have put up there? And you know, it's just a list to kind of get you guys thinking, and that's the important part. I love the dialogue of the channel. You know, we've had some great dialogue. I encourage anybody to comment on anything that comes across the channel. That's the whole point of the channel, is to get a community feel for what we think of rock and roll, who we think are the top bands, what's wrong with the music industry today, what can we do to fix it? Is it unfixable? And this channel will be handling all of those issues as we go along, but of course giving reverent time to what really counts, and that is always the music that we all grew up with, the music that if we didn't grow up with, why are we listening to now? You know, it's all current, folks. It's all a current event happening right here on the channel. So a big thank you to every single one of our viewers. A big thank you to our brand new subscribers. You're probably seeing names coming across right in front of me right now. These are brand new subscribers to the channel, folks. A big thank you to all of you. If you haven't subscribed yet, it's really easy. Just hit that subscribe to the tribe button, hit that top bell notification, and I'll make sure that you get notified of all future videos. This is The Bottom Line. I'm Mike Noland, and I'll see you in the next video.